All right, folks, we're gonna get this party started. You know what I mean? Get going on this fabulous subject of website security, because I can see it in your faces. You guys are just ecstatic at the opportunity to talk about security.
Yep.
Outstanding. All right. And any conference that has two security talks, that's what it's about. What'd you say?
So I'm on the edge of my seat.
I'm sensing a little sarcasm, man.
There's always going to be...
I'm going to let you know right now, my humor's a little dry. You know what I mean? So sometimes I'll say something expecting to laugh and I won't get anything, so I'll just chuckle at myself like, that sucked. But that's all right. We're going to work together on this. So my name is Tony, not Perez Box. But I go by Perez Box, that's my handle. Actually, Dre came up with that handle a few years back, and I don't know why. He was like, kind of think outside the box, whatever, but I don't think outside the box. But in any event, that's me, Perez Box. You can find me on Twitter, you can find me on LinkedIn, you can find me a number of places under that handle, for whatever reason. I'm one of the co-founders and the chief operating officer over at Security. Anybody know who Security is?
I don't.
You don't? Okay. We are a global company specializing strictly on website security. We started off our business around detection and remediation of malware, and today we offer a complete solution around protection and detection. So we try to fulfill the entire landscape of security from both aspects of protection and detection. My specialties are around incident handling and log analysis. So I do a lot of forensic analysis, things like that. That's kind of where I started off, and now I run the business and I have teams that do this, but that's still my specialty. And then of course my personal interests are around Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and just kind of training and that kind of stuff. The business itself, like I said, we're a global organization with that's platform agnostic. We do about 2 million scans a month, unique domains, and we handle anywhere between 400 to 500 infected websites a day, and that's 365 days a year. Just to kind of give you a little bit of background on who we are and what we do. What we're going to talk about today is what we have learned and continue to learn every day around website security, specifically malware and the types of attacks that you're experiencing as website owners and that sort of thing. So we'll talk about some of the trends, we'll talk about some of the ongoing threats, and then we'll get into some defenses as well. And if any of my images offend anybody, I'm sorry. No, not at all actually. I was as sincere as I can be actually. So it's going to be a very simple conversation, right? So let's get started. So first, we're going to get into some trends. Some of them good, some of them bad. You know what I mean? But I don't judge. You know what I mean? I'm very, I like to keep it very clean. So over the past couple of years, we have seen this explosion in malicious links. Specifically, they've recorded, as of last year, about 600% growth in malicious links. And the question becomes, what is a malicious link? A malicious link, though, links back to any one of your websites. What we normally see is anything from social media, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat. Well, maybe not Snapchat because that's kind of like temporary, but all these platforms that allow you to share information, specifically, say you write about your lovely pony and you share that post out, or anything along those lines, or you email a link to a friend, things like that. Those will all be classified as links. And what we've seen is this explosion in exploiting those links. You see them a lot in spear phishing now, so you get an email saying, hey, your FedEx shipment was shipped, and you press on it and it sends you to another domain, things like that. Very, very dangerous. And what it all comes down to, though, is exploitation of websites, right? Whether it's a Joomla site or a WordPress site or a Drupal site, whatever the case is, it's coming from a website of some kind. It's no longer just going to servers instead of, it is going to servers, but it's abusing legitimate websites that have been published online. Because let's face it, it's really easy to get a website up online these days. And what we also know is that the question always comes down to what is a good host, right? It's the host problem, et cetera, things like that. And what we know is that almost 85 to 90% of the hosts out there are infected at some point. The reality is that it's impossible for the host to keep up with it. And the reason is because you as website owners have the responsibility for the security of your site. They can do everything they can to secure the server, but they can't set your administrative passwords. They can't control your extensions. They can't control your plugins. They can't control the way you use that server. And so you have a responsibility, and so you are essentially the biggest vulnerability that all these hosts have. And that is what contributes to this. So the question should not be, what is the safest host? The question should be more, what do I need to do as an individual to protect myself and to secure my website? From our own analysis, last year we did about 9 million unique domains over the year scanned, and 19% of them were infected. The number itself is not astronomically high. It's not, wow, 80%. You know, it's kind of sad actually if I think about it. It's like, shit, only 19%. But 19% is a very large number when you start talking millions and millions of domains. And this is kind of the distribution of the stuff that we saw. So you can see a lot of conditional redirects, a lot of remote iframe includes, things like that, and we'll kind of get into that conversation. And so when we talk about kind of the evolution of these attacks, we've started to notice this evolution moving from the application, so from Joomla specifically, moving down one tier down to the server. So we started seeing things like infections of Apache, infections of the SSH binaries and email servers, things like that. And this morning they were having a conversation on security, and they were talking about using a third-party service to handle your emails, which is a very, very good concept. Because a lot of us, we like to get the most bang for our buck, and the way we do that is we shove everything into the server, right? We're like, yeah, we're gonna have a party in here. And what ends up happening is every one of those components on that server are things that you have to manage. And if one becomes vulnerable, one gets exploited, then everything gets exploited, right? And that kind of sucks. So we don't want to do that. And then, so there's this concept of polymorphism, or this kind of adaptation of malware that we've been seeing. And so originally there was a lot of infections that would render themselves on the client as the browser. As you render the site, the browser comes up and it renders and stuff like that. And that's great. And a lot of these infections, you can find them in your extensions, you can find them in your templates, things like that. Nice and easy, infections in the files. What we've seen is this evolution in which they've migrated down and they started infecting the server itself. And so modifying your Apache modules, appending themselves to the GET requests and the POST requests. So someone goes to your site, the infection sees the GET request comes in, and then it pushes itself out on top of the request. And those are very, very difficult for you as end users to remediate, especially if you're not running a VPS or something along those lines and it's a host level infection. So just kind of some information there. Another big thing we see is the exploitation of forms. It's very important that we're using reputable forms, and this kind of goes to that conversation this morning about using third parties for your emails, because what we're seeing a lot of is forms, especially those that don't have CAPTCHAs, that don't have some form of authenticating, are getting hit by these botnets that are allowing them to distribute emails via your server. And what that ends up happening is it starts blacklisting your IP for that server. And when your IP gets blacklisted, then you're in a real world of trouble. Then you start contacting folks and saying, hey, you're not getting my emails. And it's like, well, it's not because I don't like you. It's because you're blacklisted, things like that. The other big thing is spear phishing and phishing increase. So this is an example of a Wells Fargo site, in case you didn't notice the Wells Fargo logo there. Yeah, not a single crack of a smile. That's all right. So what we've started to see a lot of, though, is about 55% of companies have fallen victim to this. And phishing is very, very difficult to detect. The reason is that it gets injected within your server and doesn't necessarily get linked on the core of your site. So you can be visiting your site, etc., and you would never know that it's there. You would have to know the exact directory, and sometimes it could be convoluted directories, or convoluted in the sense that the naming convention is not right, it's stored in your images, or whatever the case may be. And the attackers use that as a direct link. So as a direct link, it's impactful because then it's taking information and pushing it off to another server, etc. But for you, if you scan your site, you won't necessarily see it because there are no links on your main page in most instances when it comes to phishing, because if not, it would defeat the purpose. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, I'm not taking questions right now.
I missed something here. Are you saying
That's a big
someone
section.
can get to a Wells Fargo lookalike page from my website?
I'm not saying. What I'm saying is that phishing is a very big threat right now, and it's continuously evolving, and it's a great moneymaker for the attackers. So your specific site, I don't know, but what I am saying is that if you're not mindful of the way you manage your environment, that it could be abused for phishing attacks, and attackers could gain entry to your server, inject pages like this that emulate a realistic site where there's Chase, Wells Fargo, whatever, and then point clients. And I'll show you an example of that here in a minute, where an email looks legitimate, but in reality, it's sending you to another site when you hover over it. So I'm saying, yeah, it's a very possible threat right now. The other big thing that's going on is what we call search engine poisoning, right? So you go to Google, you type in, Perez box, because you guys all want to look me up, right? And you see this site may be compromised, and you're like, shoot, I don't think that's his SEO working. And you're right, it's not my SEO working. It's what it is attackers are leveraging the way that search engines crawl your site and pull your information into the search engine result pages, or the SERPs as they're known, and they display it to the end users. And what they do is they can inject your site with payloads, and they'll usually put it like -999 pixels by -999 pixels or whatever, so you don't see it when you go to the site. But Google is indifferent. They don't work in the same visual boundaries that we have. And as such, they'll pick it up and they'll display it to the end user. So if you type in Perez box and it says this site may be compromised, that means that Google is saying, there's probably a problem here. We detected something that's not legitimate. And in a lot of instances, they're pharmaceutical ads. And the reason for that is because pharmaceutical ads is a high-yielding business for the attackers. They make close to like $2 billion a year in impression-based ads just from pharmaceutical ads. So in other words, by getting them to redirect to a pharmaceutical site or whatever, they're going to make money. So it's in their interest to attack and hack people because it's easy, right? Because we make it easy. So the thing to understand about these attacks is that as much as we may like to think, we are not as unique or as important as we may like to think we are. And a lot of these attacks are opportunistic. A lot of them are automated. And there's a number of scripts and tools available to these attackers that allow them to quickly crawl the web to identify links. And if they find a vulnerability of some kind, whether it's a vulnerability in one of your templates or a vulnerability within your extensions or your access control, they can then exploit it. And they get a report back saying, hey, this site was successful in the sense that they were able to gain access to it. Then the attacker can go in and make whatever modifications they want, inject the payloads, and from there you are having a very bad day. So the other thing to take into consideration, we talked a little bit about this morning, is around cross-site contamination, or this concept that I like to consider like soup kitchen servers. We have seen a lot of instances in which environments host a number of applications, whether it's Joomla, WordPress, Drupal, vBulletin, the whole 9 yards. You have this plethora of applications on your server, and any one of them is not being maintained. And when that happens, any one of them become vulnerable. And if that vulnerability gets exploited, then the attacker is able to take advantage of your entire stack. And that is why it's so important that we start thinking more along the lines of segmentation. You don't want to use a production box as a development box, as a staging box. Because the reality is that we get busy and we forget and we move beyond the application we started with, and then they stay live and people take advantage of it, because that's what we do as people. So cross-site contamination. Very important concept. We have to bear that in mind. Soup kitchen servers, we need to maintain our production environments as pristine as possible. Take all the junk off it. As much as you just have this overwhelming feeling to put as much crap as you can on that server, try to fight that urge and avoid that. Again, not a single smile. Yes, ma'am.
So I definitely understand when people put multiple Joomla installs in one,
Sure.
like I don't know the right terminology, so I'll call it a cPanel account, because that's like one of the cPanel, like create an account. But if I have multiple accounts with multiple different username passwords in my virtual server,
Sure.
Is it still a possibility? Or
So,
less of a possibility?
no, I mean, it's still the same possibility. It's highly impractical to tell an end user to have an account for every site. I completely understand and appreciate that argument.
But I do.
And that's fine. What I like to recommend is that think in terms of production, staging, development, core functional areas, okay? And then maintain your servers like that. So if you had 3 accounts, have like production, staging, and testing. And on your production environment, ensure that that is as pristine as possible for your organization. So if you're running 10 sites on there, make sure that all 10 sites are maintained to the T. Make sure that the credentials are unique for every one of those sites. Make sure that you're not using the same credentials across all the sites. The possibility of compromise is still there. The possibility of cross-site contamination is still there. But focusing ourselves in and ensuring that the environment is as pristine as possible, just with production applications, helps you in the right direction. It's harder is a very relative term. It'll give you a better state, a better posture around security. Okay. You heard me provide a graph around iframe includes, things of that nature. Last year, NBC was compromised, and NBC had an iframe include. And it's something that we deal with on a regular basis on every site. You don't have to be NBC to be affected by this. And what it is essentially is it takes advantage of browser-based objects like JavaScript, ActiveX, things that you don't even think about anymore, because when you open the browser, it automatically runs. And that's what they try to take advantage of. And so these iframes, they'll load immediately unless you have JavaScript disabled, which I almost guarantee that a majority of you don't. You probably all have it enabled. Why? Because it gives us that Web 2.0 feeling that we enjoy. And in that instance, we have things like drive-by downloads and abuses to 0 days, like what we saw last year. We had a huge explosion of 0-day exploits in Java, and just right now there's a 0-day, not a 0-day, but a vulnerability in Microsoft Word that's being worked on right now, that's being patched. And these drive-by downloads try to take advantage of those.
What's a 0-day?
A 0-day is an instance in which a vulnerability is identified and released, but there is nobody was aware of it, and there's no patch for it. And so the 0-day marks D-Day essentially. This is the day that it was identified, and you can go out 7 days, 45 days, just depends on how long it takes them to patch it. So for instance, the Microsoft 0-day has been out, I think 2.5 weeks, and they're still working on a patch for it. So another thing we're seeing is around malware attacks, specifically on mobile devices. We continue to hear that mobile devices is the new frontier of malware attacks, and it really is, specifically Android devices. Remember the malicious link discussion we were having? This is exactly how they distribute those payloads, via malicious links, and a lot of them targeting Droid devices. iOS is a little bit harder for the attackers than Droid. Just because of the way it's built and the process for installing things like that, their access control, etc. But there are still payloads that address them. The other thing we're seeing a lot of actually is porn redirects. Server level, for whatever reason, a lot of the server level infections we're seeing, like CDORC and whatnot, which are Linux-based Apache infections, are doing porn redirects. I don't know why, but they really enjoy it. So that's what we're dealing with. And what that means is that all your mobile devices have unique referrers and user agent, etc. And so when the server sees that user agent comes in, they're like, boom, triple X, baby. So, okay, that was a little awkward. So the other thing is Google is on fire these days. They're blacklisting about 10,000 sites a day. They just like bam, 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 just blacklisting fool. In any event, it kind of sucks. And, I think like 2 years ago, people freaked out a little bit about it and kind of were like, brand reputation, the whole 9 yards. And it's still legitimate. That argument is still legitimate. But what I've started to notice is this resilience around end users, where it's like, I'm blacklisted, I'll get it fixed. You know, maybe that's good, maybe that's not. I don't know, but it's still a problem, and it will have at least a temporary impact on your brand. So you'll have a user go to your site, and all of a sudden they'll see this and they'll get freaked out about it. It's like, I saw this red. You know, and the less technical they are, the more freaked out they get. Like, you're gonna kill my site. You know, my computer's going down. So it is an ongoing problem. There are many ways to address it. Google provides you webmaster tools where you can submit your own site. There's a lot of services and organizations that you can leverage to release that. And the real message I'm trying to make here, though, is that don't freak out. It's not the end of the world. I know that it's really easy to freak out. I know that it's this feeling of lack of control. You don't know what's going on. You have no way to remove this. It is a reality in which we live in today. And what we have found is that usually 7 days and you can get beyond the impacts to your brand. So there's an immediate impact. You may lose a little bit of money, etc., but it's not the end of the world. You're going to get your business back. You're going to get your clients back. And 7 days seems to be that kind of trend of kind of that recovery period where like, you can sleep in again. So, and then of course, you can't have a security talk without talking about brute force attacks. You know, this is one way to get around is, you know, you can carry the car or you can turn the engine on. Some people prefer carrying, I don't judge. But around brute force, it's the concept of trying to gain access to something via brute force means, right? So you just hit it as much as you can until you get in. So, and this is often specific to kind of like your access control points. And by access control, I mean like I'm trying to log into your account via administrator or something along those lines. And then there's denial of service, and many people confuse the two. Denial of service is not brute force, and brute force is not denial of service, but a byproduct of brute force is denial of service. So if I'm hitting your site continuously trying to gain access and you have a small server, you're probably going to go down. Your site's going to probably go down, and you're going to be like, my site's down. I lost $10,000, whatever the case is. But what it really comes down to is intent. When we try to differentiate what is brute force and what is denial of service, we have to understand the intent. And intent in one is about access. Intent in the other is about disruption of service. So I don't like you. I'm just going to take your site down. I know, we didn't even meet. But you know what's interesting is that online attacks are exactly like that. I don't need to know her. I just may not like her site. I may not like the way her domain looks. I might just be bored. You know what I mean? I may have nothing going on. Nobody's laughing at my jokes, so I'm going to attack all your sites. But the point is that it's about intent. And that's the biggest differentiator between brute force and denial of service. So, and denial of service can be small and it can be large. And when you talk about large denial of service, you're talking about distributed denial of services. Like, you know, every one of your boxes I'm going to use to attack Dre's website because I don't like Dre. So,
I don't like you.
yeah, so it starts attacking me back. It's like, hey. Sorry, I do that. I go off on tangents. Another thing that seems to be the trend these days. God, I'm saying that a lot. Another thing. I need to stop doing that. And anyway, is trust. Exploiting trust. Online, we have this mindset in which, especially us that are in the open source environment, where, hey, I'm going to use this extension. Hey, I'm going to use this template. You know what I mean? Hey, it's open source. Let's, you know, kumbaya. Let's get together and hold hands. And a lot of people are abusing that. And it was inevitable. It's going to happen. It was going to happen. It was to be expected. And that, as it says, it takes years to earn, but seconds to break. And a lot of the bad press that platforms like Joomla get are exactly around that. It's the exploitation of trust and people that just get so irate because they were abused, and they get online and they blast it, etc. And this happens a lot with like extensions, and I'll give some examples of stuff that happened actually this year, a few months ago, in which free extensions were being abused for spam, and I'll share that here in a minute. So you may not know this, but malware as a service actually exists. Almost like software as a service, or platform as a service, or infrastructure as a service. You gotta love it when they trend it, like, yeah, malware as a service. And what that means is that I can pay Michelle here, say that, hey Michelle, I don't want to get my hands dirty, but I know you got all the right tools, and me and you are down. So if you can just attack, great. That'll be legit.
Sure, okay.
And she'll charge me some money, and now I can just sit back and be like, oh yeah, watch the site go down. So it's a big business right now on the underground. And there's a variety of tools, and that's the thing. There's so much money in it. There's a variety of tools. You don't have to be a developer these days. You can get a tool with a nice help guide and say, oh wow, if I press this button, it'll attack that site. It's kind of very inconvenient. And the thing to bear in mind is that everyone's a target. Okay? Like, if you've got folks like Target with 60 million credit cards being exploited, I'm going to go on a limb here and say that they probably have some more security controls than you do. And if it happens to them, it's probably going to happen to you. I don't know you, so I'm not going to judge, and I'm not going to say it's going to happen to you, but I'm just saying it might happen to you. And so what we need to do is not say we're never going to get sick, but take the proper steps that we need to ensure that if we get sick, we know how to respond to it. And that's kind of the message we're trying to do. It's just kind of around awareness and kind of end-user awareness.
Sorry, just going to.
You got it? No, I just want to make sure you tweet it. You know what I mean? Just get my good side.
I'm tweeting it.
All right. So let's talk about some threats. You know what I mean? We're probably not going to throw a rock at a tank because it's probably not going to work. But it'll kind of set this tone. So when we think about attacks and how they work, you have to understand the mindset of an attacker. Initially, what we want to do is we don't want to do reconnaissance. We want to understand what the platform is, what they're using, etc. We want to identify a vulnerability. Okay, how am I going to get in? Am I going to get in via access? Am I going to get in via vulnerability? Whatever the case is. And then once I understand that, I'm going to attack the site. Once I attack the site, I have to make a decision. Am I going to use this for denial of service? Am I going to distribute payloads? Am I going to use it as a part of my botnet? Whatever the case may be. In that process, you have cleanup and sustainability, right? So I no longer want to leverage your existing access control. I want to do something that allows me to bypass your access control to ensure that I can still maintain access to that environment. Usually done in the form of backdoors, or constantly known as backdoors. And so what that means is that they essentially can bypass any controls you've already put in place. So just because you see somebody log in like, oh, let me change my password, the odds are you always have to think there's a back door in here and they're going to bypass it, whatever controls I put in place. So changing the password is not going to do me any justice unless I find out my back doors. Okay? You have cross-site scripting attacks. So by cross-site scripting is where I get into discussions around object exploitation of the browser. So for instance, you have objects that are leveraged in the browser like JavaScript, ActiveX, Flash, things like that, that immediately run on load of the site. So you load the site, it runs, and it's automatic. Attackers leverage this, such as MVC case, where MVC loaded, it loaded JavaScript, it had an iframe object embedded in there, and it did a download on the end user's environment. You have things like remote local file inclusions. We see a lot of this. So there was the media manager vulnerability last year in Joomla that allowed them to upload PHP files into your images directory. This is specifically leveraging remote file inclusions. Local file inclusions is the ability to load files within the environment. So I get into your environment, I can load your Etsy password, or I can load your Etsy shadow file, or whatever the case is, to see that information, and you can kind of exploit it from there. Very, very dangerous. RFI seems to be the biggest issue we see these days with extensions and templates and things like that. Of course, there's SQL injection. Injecting information into your database to retrieve something else. A lot of the information we store, username, passwords, credit cards, all that information goes into databases unless you're doing something like NoSQL or something like that. And then, of course, there's spear phishing. We talked about phishing earlier, about with the Wells Fargo site, etc. This is an example of an email that I actually received. And if you hover over the print receipt, you would see that it's going to some Russian domain. It's going to some website that I highly doubt is FedEx. But a lot of them will look legitimate. It'll feel legitimate. And because we're human, we have I do. Like if I see a button, I just want to press it. Just like if I see a line, I want to get in line. I don't really know why I'm in line. Maybe I'm the only one that it happens to, but I think it was the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps did that to me. I had to like, oh, there's a line, shoot. Why are you in line? Everybody else is in line. I don't know. That had nothing to do with security, but that's all right. Backdoors. So here's an example of a backdoor page. And once this is injected in your site, as you can see, you have full access to the environment. You can upload, you can execute commands, you can see the information on the server, you can do all kinds of crazy stuff, change permissions, add users, the whole 9 yards. It really sucks. And if you don't find it, it'll cause you a lot of headaches. The question often I get is, well, how do I find the back doors, Tony? And I'm like, I don't know. But the reality is you have to have scripts to try to identify. There's ways to look for signatures, things like that. But if you don't have tools to do that, one thing you always have at your disposal are, I like how you do that. I'm just going to throw that out there, is logs. You have logs on your servers. Everybody has logs. And a little diligence to analyze the logs, see what's going on, will take you a long way, especially if you look for all your post requests. So your GET requests are when you're getting something from the server, right? Your post is when you're pushing something to the server. So if you look for your post requests, you'll see if somebody's abusing it by pushing something that they should not. And if you see something called like, r59.php, and you're like, wait a minute, that's not right. That doesn't sound familiar. It's a good opportunity to take a look at it. And in the underground world, there's a lot of egos and personalities. And so if you open the file, it's usually like, done by me. You know what I mean? They'll have like, these little pictures and like their name and their email. You can email them and be like, you're a turd. So yeah, they have their Facebook pages. You're like, wow, way to go there, Turbo. So free is not always free. Okay, I talked about this a minute ago around kind of abusing trust. You were not here for that. Free is not always free, and this is an example of that. Here's a Joomla forum from earlier this year, I think, and here are some extensions or modules that were being abused. And what was happening is, and you see this across all platforms, is they'll take the free version and they'll make some slight modifications. And the reality is that we're all not developers. We're not going to look through the code and shit like that. We just don't do that. But what that does, though, is it gives them an opportunity to inject payloads or spam links or redirections that you may not be aware of, and you may not even notice it. So the module or the component or the extension will run as advertised, but in the process, it'll be doing the work of two. It'll be multitasking. And so we want to bear that in mind. What does all this mean? That's me as Jaws. That was me yesterday, yeah. Brand reputation, I talked about that a minute ago. You may lose some clients, you may freak out a little bit, just kind of take a step back, understand the environment that you're in, what's going on, and you'll be okay. There's obviously legal implications. You're going to get these people like, oh, I'm going to report you to the BPP. And you're like, go ahead. It's inevitable. People freak out and they go crazy. I'm going to blast you on social media. All right, dude, whatever. Don't freak out. It is probably going to be the worst day of your life because it's one of those feelings. It's a psychological feeling. You've lost all this control. You're like, this is my virtual presence. It was supposed to be so easy. I'm supposed to be making millions of dollars. I can't help you in the millions of dollars, but everything else, it's very recoverable. So let's talk about some defenses. This is for all the kitten lovers. This is where our insight comes in from. What's that?
The Toki kitten picture.
Yeah, you always, you know how they say you always have to have like a kitten in your presentation.
No.
They don't say that.
I don't like it.
You don't like it?
I'm not a cat person.
You're not a cat person?
I'm a dog person.
I got nothing. I got nothing on that. Our insight around what to protect comes from this. We get about 125 plus attacks on a monthly basis, about 4,000 to 5,000 a day. This is just on our personal properties on security.net.
Like they're trying to hack into your stuff.
Yeah, continuously.
Yeah,
And we're a security company, so it's like the Mecca. You hack a security company and you're golden. And we actually deal with a lot more sophisticated attacks. So we'll deal with attacks against our DNSs. We'll deal with attack against third-party providers. I've had people attacking my Facebook. I've had people attacking my LinkedIn. I've had people attacking my Apple ID. Anything to gain access, because once they have access to our information, it makes a great story. You know what I mean? Especially on the underground, like, these guys suck. So based on this insight is where our guidance comes on. Like, no, seriously. We're going to talk about some principles. We're going to talk about some access control. We're going to talk about some vulnerabilities and how to address that. The first thing I want you to keep in mind is around risk. Okay? And you have to set your expectation. If you're going into this, I will never get hacked, you're doing it wrong. I mean, like, I don't want to lie to you, but you're doing it wrong. When you do that, you poorly set your expectations. And whether you're a designer, you're a developer, whatever the case is, when you talk to your clients, you know that as a project, you have to set the expectations. And you look at your site as that. Okay? When you do that, you understand that it's about risk reduction, and risk will never be zero. If it was zero, we would have one antivirus in the business. You know what I mean? Whoever that was. Because they'd be like, it's impossible to get infected. You notice how there's like 30 or 40 different antiviruses, and you're like, I don't even know who to choose from anymore. There's so many of them. But why is that? It's because everybody does it a little bit differently. Everybody detects something differently, and nobody can guarantee you 100% that you will never get infected. It's the same principles apply to the web. I also want to talk about a concept known as defense in depth. It's very common for us in the information security domain, but for the end users, you don't really think about that. And I actually want to read this because it's important. Defense in depth is a concept in which multiple layers of security controls, defenses, are placed throughout an information technology system. Its intent is to provide redundancy in the event a security control fails or a vulnerability is exploited. There's a lot of value in that. And what it's essentially saying, in very simple terms, is that you don't put all your eggs in one basket. You have a number of controls in place for failover and redundancy. So, let's think about access, for instance. If we're looking at access, the first thing we want to do is use good passwords, right? Personally, I don't get into the conversation about usernames, etc. I think that with a good, strong password, you're golden, based on the type of attacks we see. So, what complex, long, and unique. That's what I want you to keep in mind when you're thinking about passwords. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but password with the @ sign and a capital P and dollar signs is not very unique. You probably didn't know that, but what's that? Yeah, you probably like. I won't tell you what to do, but you probably should change it. Yeah, we like to think that we're very unique, and we're actually not. We're not very unique at all. Actually, like, people know this stuff. And there's actually tools that allow you to say, like, hey, when you attack this site, I want you to try all the combinations, and I want you to treat a capital A as an @ sign, and I want you to treat it as a 4, and it'll go through all the permutations of it and attack it. So you're not fooling anybody. Ideally, you can come up with phrases, you can come up with random generation is my personal favorite. I use things like LastPass, 1Password, and I just do a random generator. I don't know any of my passwords. I know 2 passwords, and that's what I use to get in. Question?
1, what's your master password for 1Password? You can share it. And 2, do you recommend special symbols and things for that, or hey man?
If I'm going to start sharing passwords, I might as well just give you my social security number, my bank account. You know what I mean? Let's not stop there. You know, let's make it easy. I actually have 3 modes, which is a little bit over the top. But I use PGP locally for a password that I then take for my 1Password that then gives me my password for my LastPass. I don't recommend that.
I don't recommend.
It makes it really, really difficult. But what was your second question?
I only have one question.
Oh, the first one you were messing with me.
Yes.
I got you. All right.
So what's your, how do you keep track of those passwords?
I don't. I keep track of one password.
You do what?
I keep track of one password.
You lost all the rest of them.
Well, I didn't lose the rest of them. I just got rid of the rest of them. No, but I use LastPass. I use a password manager, and that password manager keeps track of all my passwords.
LastPass?
Yeah, I mean, I know maybe a handful of passwords. Like I use like silly applications. You know what I mean? Like my Snapchat or something like that. But no, I'm just kidding. I don't use Snapchat. But I have a few like I've seen you before, man. I've seen you. Awkward. But there's a few passwords that I use like for silly stuff. Like if I want to beta test an application or a product of some kind.
Where does LastPass make their money?
Where do they make their money? I think they're like an open source project.
They have a pro version.
They have a pro version for like $1 a year or something like that. So they're not rolling around in the Bentleys, you know what I mean? They're probably still rocking Civics. But yeah. And so you guys are messing me all up here, man. So defense in depth, right? And controls and that sort of stuff, right? So taking an example of access. So you're gonna mess me up right now, man.
How many characters is long?
That's a good question. I like to go no less than 12 to 15 to start off. But my stuff is so random that I usually go 30. It doesn't really matter. The longer it is, the longer it takes to crack it.
We use 24 on most of our server stuff.
That's cool. You know, there's a funny little fact. You know how a lot of organizations will have like a 3-month rotation for passwords and stuff like that? That actually came from, I think, back in the 70s or 80s, and it was calculated based on computational power of systems. And what they came up with was that it takes about an average of 3 times based on 3 months based on the computational power of systems at that time to crack a password. So they were saying, okay, every 3 months. These days, it's like every 24 hours. It goes so goddamn fast. So, what's up, bud?
Yeah, we dig complex passwords and two-factor authentication.
Yeah, how'd that work out for you?
Awesome. YubiKeys, man.
What's up? YubiKeys, is that what you use? So yeah, that's another form of layered defenses or defense in depth, right? So he's talking about he's using complex passwords. He uses two-factor authentication with YubiKeys, right? You can use two-factor authentication with your devices. You could also do things like principles of least privilege. And the principle of least privilege is very, very simple, and I don't know why we don't apply it. We all have this need to give everybody administrator right. Like, you want access to my site, I'm gonna make you an administrator, yo, because I don't know what you want to do, you know? You're like, I probably don't need to do that. So we need to think about that. We need to think about the roles in our applications and say, okay, do you need to be an administrator? Are you gonna be an author? Are you gonna, can I get some candy? What's going on here? Are you gonna, you know, giving a shit caring. No, I'm just kidding. I'm watching my figure. But so what you want to do is, if somebody needs to make a post of some kind or a page of some kind, give them the privilege that they require to get their job done, and nothing more, nothing less. If they need to be an administrator, give them administrative rights. Take those rights away when they're completed. They don't need to have it indefinitely. If somebody leaves, take their privileges away. It's a really, really simple concept. It's a really, really simple maintenance step. Yeah, we all kind of overlook it. I don't understand that.
But what's up? Doesn't that mean you have to create more than one user account?
That's a concept. You know what I mean? That's wow. You're absolutely right. So I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you brought that up because there's accountability. It's very, very important when it comes to security. You do want to have multiple accounts. As crazy as that sounds. You want to have multiple accounts because if something ever happens, you want to understand whose account was compromised. Not so that you can fire them. I mean, that might be a byproduct. I don't know. But so that you understand what you need to fix. Okay, if Michelle was hacked, how was she hacked? Are other systems that she has access to hacked? You have to presume the worst. And everything that she has access to has to be updated. Okay? It's great for forensics work. Without it, it makes our lives very difficult. But that's one concept of, principle of layered defenses. Excuse me. Staying informed is very, very important. It is difficult for us as an organization to stay on top of all the vulnerabilities that come out. It's difficult for any organization. So when you see organizations like this or Joomla, where they have like the vulnerable extension list, although it may be slightly dated because it's probably impossible to maintain in real time, you want to leverage it the best you can. So when you're looking for extensions, when you're looking for things, if it's a reputable extension, it's most likely going to be in here. It's most likely been reviewed. If there's an issue, it gets reported. The more downloads that there are for something, the more important it is to stay on top of. And so if you're using a very reputable platform or extension, then you know that a lot of people are using it. The more people use it, the bigger target it has. So if it's not on this list, you're good to go. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? The more people use it, the more time I want to invest to attack it or hack it, because that's more people that I can abuse.
And there's just like stuff we can't control, like somehow their server gets exploited.
Sometimes that happens too. Yeah, sometimes it happens, and they'll modify the mirrors, and whatever you download gets injected. The thing is, with sources like this, like the Vel, you have the opportunity to look stuff up. It's an easy way and a couple extra steps that you can take to search for something. This doesn't mean that the extension doesn't have a problem. It just means that it hasn't been reported. So just bear that in mind. Question?
Isn't this a two-edged sword? Isn't this kind of like a candy store for a criminal too?
Well, absolutely. I mean, if they look at it and they find a vulnerability, they can absolutely do that. Yeah. So, but ideally, end users are doing their research, and if they have it, they remove it. But yeah, it's a risk. Yeah, like posting it's vulnerable.
If I want to attack something, I'll just go.
It's highly likely if you're going to attack something, you've got other resources. You're probably not going to come to the Vel to do that. It's probably listed somewhere else already.
So it's only good for me.
Oftentimes, when it gets into here, it's been reported already. There's a number of sources already available, like what Dre's saying, that the attackers monitor on a daily basis, and that often feeds a lot of sources like this. So for you as an end user, this is a good source.
In fact, I believe that there's a specific process for the disclosure before it actually ends up in Vel.
Certainly.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean it's not on those other sites.
You're absolutely
Definitely out there.
Absolutely. There's a number of sites that don't have any process at all. They can just disclose it, and that's a big issue. Yeah. Sometimes the attackers just come up with a proof of concept, they post it, and you're done. From a hardening perspective, one of the things that we like to do, and we do continuously, specifically because it actually disables. It addresses a lot of the backdoor issues, is killing PHP execution. One of the big locations is in the images directory in Joomla. In the last media manager vulnerability last year, the vulnerability was such that it was allowing you to upload arbitrary PHP and injecting it into your images directory. Now think about that. Do you need PHP to run in images or stories?
No, and you don't always go in and look at all your images folders.
Absolutely. You don't normally think about that. Your cache. If you think of the Timtum and how Timtum worked, it uploaded arbitrary PHP into your cache directory. Do you need PHP to run in your cache?
No.
No, you don't. And so there's the link for the media manager that we wrote about last year. So that's a very simple script right there. You just put it into your htaccess. You can actually add that to your extensions and plugins as well. It just depends. It gets a little dangerous when you start putting it in those directories, depending on how they were written. Sometimes they require PHP execution. So you can play with it. Just put it in you just create an htaccess file, put it at the root of the file, and you'll be surprised at how many things this stops.
You can put it in the root of images/stories or images.
You can put it in images and it'll propagate. So the way it works is it propagates. You can put it at, you can put it at the root of your site. It'll probably just kill your site. But the way htaccess works, it propagates to all the directories. So just put it at the root of the site that you have no issues. I probably wouldn't put it at the root because then your site would just go.
In terms of controls, what would you give this in terms of a priority? How important is this?
It's very important. That's why I presented it.
It's
It's actually one of the only hardening tips that I give you because there's actually like 100. There's so many tips that people give and all the crazy stuff, like the whole checklist. Nobody reads that shit. You know what I mean? You just like one thing that works, and this is actually very effective. It actually sucks for us as an organization because then then the malware doesn't run, and then we have like no business. But it's very effective for you as a website owner. So it's one of the few things that I do on all my installs. What? No. Well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe you don't want to have a website. So if you put it at the root, it's probably going to kill your website. So if you're cool with that, then yeah, do what you got to do, brother.
Where did you put it?
Right here in these directories: cache, temp, modules, components, images. I put them in all. I mean, just test your site. Depending on how things are developed, you can put it in templates and extensions as well. But I don't like to tell people that because then they break stuff and they're like, Tony, you broke my site. I'm like, oh god. Yeah, no, like no, buddy. I'm just giving you the tools. You know what I mean? What you're doing is on your own.
Precisely.
Including components, don't you kill the component, all the components in there?
Depends on how they're written. Not all the time.
If they require PHP.
If they require PHP, that's why I'm saying use it like images, cache, and temp. You're pretty much good to go. When you start getting into components, plugins, templates, things like that, you kind of want to do it like one-offs and see what breaks, what doesn't break. Because I don't know how everybody develops. Some people develop it differently. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it does. You just want to bear that in mind. You know, just kind of play with it a little bit. And then here's a little trick: if you get hacked, especially for like pharma or spam, just because there's like 20 of us in here, I'm going to tell you this. You know, like libraries and includes, as long as you stay within your same version, you can just like remove and replace. It's like if you're at 1.5x or 2x or 3x, whatever the case is, just replace it. And in a lot of instances, you'll address the fact because they like to go to those core files for some reason. So libraries and includes, two easy directories you can replace. In a lot of instances, you'll address your spam issues. Oh, what am I doing here? Oh, yeah. So please back up. I mean, I guess it's not that hard to back up. You know, even if you don't use a service, do it yourself. Just take the files and like just put it somewhere so that you can leverage that. Here's a couple different. I like services, so this is what I recommend. We have a backup service, but there's also CodeGuard. Akiba backup is one of the big ones. I'm feeling a lot of pressure. Stay current. Obviously, I can't explain how important that is. The challenge with this is that you've got 1x, you got 1.5x, you got 2x, you got 3x. Upgrade path is not that simple. So for that reason, one of the things that we're recommending a lot now is I think you'll continue to see this change in which people start going towards application firewalls. And it'll sit off your server, but it'll do virtual hardening, virtual patching, things like that, especially for those folks that are on 1x and 1.5x and things like that. They just can't upgrade for whatever reasons. You're going to want that layer of defense. And the biggest surprise is, the biggest weakness and vulnerability is often you, the website owners. It's usually the user, yeah. So,
because I can like have a 30-character password, but if then my website owner goes in and changes her password to her pet.
Exactly. Yeah. Here are the 10 stupid administrative tricks. I was chuckling when I read these. This is all on the Joomla site. I thought that was pretty funny. You know, use the cheapest host. You know, you find index.php was defaced and you assume everything is fine. That's happened. That's so true. Like, I don't know why it keeps happening. You fix it and it comes back. You fix it and it comes back. It's really weird. Don't worry about updating. Install and forget it. All is well with your new site. You know, like this install it and forget it kind of thing. Like, I'm good now. I got a website. Woohoo! It's kind of funny, but maybe not as funny for others. Some notable resources. I'll have this online, but just different resources you guys can go to. Checklist, performance FAQs, ExploitDB and Seconia security advisories are good for vulnerabilities. Of course, Google Forms. We have a lot of stuff on our blog and TV, etc. And then, of course, do you have any questions?
I have one. I'll go in.
I'm done with you.
Hit
me!
Could you look at the logs of the taxes though?
Unfortunately.
I'll look at a site, I'll go back into admin tools and look at the log security things. And it'll be really quiet, and then it'll just be like for several days, just try everything in the book, and then it'll get really quiet again. So that's the pattern you see. Absolutely.
There's a lot of automation. It comes in like this. So one morning, hey, my presentation. So like you'll see it like this, especially at nighttime, like especially when it's your night, it's like Eastern Europeans morning. So that's when everybody's getting up and like, let's go get the milk. So they just put their computers on and they go do their stuff and let it run. Yeah, so that's why you see a spike like this. It's always going like this. It's on timers and stuff like that. What's up?
Where can I get the tools to become a hacker?
Where can you get the tools to become a hacker? Actually, if you go on the Tor proxy, there's a couple sites you can go to, but you can only get to them via Tor, and they'll gain you access to the underbelly of the web.
I'm just curious.
I'm here for you. Go ahead.
How do you feel about like on-site security firewall products? Like
On-site, like you're going to put like a Barracuda firewall in your rack?
more like RS firewall components.
I think it's great if you can afford that. You know, I think that from an organizational standpoint, if you can afford that kind of infrastructure, then you probably have a SOC or a NOC or something like that, then that's awesome. But I could almost guarantee you that the average Joe Blow that's getting a shared server probably is not putting in a...
And then those definitions are going to be more network-based. Then they're going to be current with website malware. Definitions.
So RS firewall is a software firewall.
Say again?
It's a Joomla extension you install.
He's talking about a Joomla.
Oh, you're talking about Iris. You're talking about application level WAFs that go into the platform itself. Like, oh, gotcha. Sorry. I wasn't familiar with it. I thought you were talking about inline appliances and things like that. Let me choose my politically correct response to this. They're good. There's a reason we went towards the services side and not the platform specific side. It's very limited, and it's only as strong as the resources in which it sits. So there are going to be limitations, and what you see, you're already seeing at the platform. We like to be at the edge, looking at the traffic coming in, not when the traffic hits me and analyzing it. So they can be effective. But there will be limitations with anything that's locally installed like that. Yeah. And then, of course, there's always contributions to denial of service, things like that if things fail. Am I done?
Yeah.
I apologize.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you.
That's it. No more questions for you people.
Thank you.